Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever VRFocus VRCast, produced by Immersively. I'm your host, Jamie Feltham, and staff writer for VRFocus. I'm joined with Editor-in-Chief of VRFocus, Kevin Joyce.
Hello.
And our first ever special guest for the episode is one Mr. Nick Pittom.
Hello.
Of Fire Panda fame.
Away at Southwest VR, Kevin was there as well. Check Reddit. When get back, and yeah, everything
exploding.
1,000 HMDs announced.
Everyone's working on HMD. Everybody.
VR suddenly. No, it's exciting times.
But before we get to that, you've just mentioned SWVRC, which of course stands for Southwest Virtual Reality Conference.
Yes.
Got that all in one. That was good. Hosted by Opposable Games yesterday in Bristol in the UK. You two were both there. It was a packed day full of loads of schedules and talks and demos. I think, Nick, you hosted a talk, didn't you?
Yes, I did talk on real-time storytelling in VR.
Okay.
Real-time VR storytelling. And then opportunities and possibilities.
Okay, so how did you kind of approach that? What did you touch upon? Give us the elevator pitch.
Give the elevator pitch. Basically, real-time VR storytelling, taking a game engine, telling a story within that with no interaction. You just watch it happen around you. And what that means and how you might do that and what the language of VR storytelling will be, because it's going to be different from film, it's going to be different from games and theatre and all these other things. You can't have cuts, you can't have moving cameras, so how do you tell the story with that? And basically trying to look at the approach to that without it being a gimmick, without it being a bad way to tell a story, and for it to be a genuinely exciting new way to approach a story.
So how do you tell a story with that?
Well, you essentially, you want to essentially, if your viewer sits in one place, you don't want to be moving the camera. You can relocate them. You don't want to do it too often, but they essentially sit in one space, and then the action is happening around them. It's the way that you plan the scene out, the way you design the scene to direct the viewers in the way you want them to look. It's the way you have the characters and things happening within the scene. But of course, if you've got something happening over there and they're looking out the window, there's something interesting happening over there, something flying outside the window, and you want them to look over here. Well, you could either use audio cues to get them to look over here, or you could, have something animate and point them over in that direction. Or what you can use is these things called gaze cues, which are essentially waiting for the viewer to look in a direction and then queuing up what happens then. But you can mix all these things together, and it's not you don't need to be as simple as gaze cues. You don't just have to wait for someone to look in a direction. You could, transplant the action into a different place. So if I'm looking over here a lot, instead of the scene happening here or the thing happening here, it can happen there, because we can do that. It's all in real time. It's something we can do now, and maybe the scene changes around that. Or you can just, because you're aware of everything the viewer's doing and what they're paying attention to, it doesn't just have to be a cue. You could, work that out in some other kind of algorithm or some other kind of way of working out cleverly what they're looking at and what they're paying attention to, and kind of match the artistry to that. And I was talking about it a lot yesterday to other people. This is not just, I think people might hear that and think, well, that's a bit awkward. That feels like you're trying to kind of shoehorn storytelling in, and you've got to do all these processes to make it work. It feels a bit clunky, or it doesn't have to be, not at all. It's just because it's a new medium. It's about crafting story in such a way that you're literally preserving the emotion and preserving the story. You're able to, in film for instance, you're able to cut to a close-up of something, to get someone's reaction on their face. Well, you're forcing the viewer to look at that. And the same with if you cut to a wide shot and you see something crash through the scene, you're forcing the viewer to do that. Doing with gaze cues or other things, you are still essentially forcing the viewer to kind of get that bit of the scene when you want to. But it's actually, the viewer has got their own, if they want to spend time observing this thing that's over here, they can have that. And in a sense, hopefully by that kind of pacing, they have a subconscious kind of, everything kind of fits really nicely, because they're enjoying watching this. You don't have to cut away from it. They can just just enjoy it for a bit longer. And then when they're ready, they can over here and the next bit of the scene starts. It could be quite an organic and a very kind of powerful way of telling a story that other mediums can't do. Of course, it's still very early days, so it's experimenting with what works, what doesn't work, and yeah.
So you're clearly very clued up on this. Have you been experimenting with it?
I have, yes. I did my 2 demos based on Studio Ghibli films, and I think in those there wasn't that sort of thing. It was basically just things you can explore as well. There's some interaction going on. I think from that I learned a lot of what doesn't work as far as that sort of storytelling goes. For instance, if you have interaction like there is in Totoro, you can interact with the umbrella and hand it to Totoro and all these other things. It encourages the player essentially at that point. They're no longer viewers, they're players. You're encouraging them to have more interaction. They want to affect the world more. They want to explore and poke around and make the world do things. That's really great if that's what you want. You can tell interesting stories that way. That's really great. But if you want to just have a story, you want to present it to someone and that kind of thing, interaction's not a good way of doing things. So that was kind of something I learned. But yeah, equally, all the other lessons about gaze cues, these are things I've been thinking about. I'm working on a couple of projects right now, I can't quite talk about because they're not ready. But they're using all of these ideas.
I mean, VR film, it's really interesting. It's been only in the past couple of months it's becoming a very big reality.
Well, obviously, Oculus Story Studio was the big hit there.
Yeah, because I mean, it was just at CES that Oculus's Nate Mitchell said, film might be the big thing. And when you read that the first time, you kind of took that as a throwaway comment. It was like, yes, but you're Oculus, you're still doing video games. And then at Sundance, they announced Story Studio. And that was like, oh, hang on, no, this is really is going to be as big as games to a certain degree, and actually in a very similar position to games right now, in that we are having to think about all the stuff you just said, just as we're having to do with video games. So we're all having to think about how we change design and things like that.
I've often said that entertainment is going to be the driving factor for VR. It may not be the be all and end all, but it's going to be the thing that makes people shell out for VR. And entertainment can come in many, many different forms. It can come in like the music videos, the Paul McCartney live things that Jaunt have been doing. It can come in short films. It can come in full-length feature films. It can come in video games. But one way or the other, it's going to come in entertainment first, and then it will be used in industry and education and such. But entertainment's going to be the catalyst.
From my point of view, the real-time stuff, the stuff the Story Studio are doing, I went out and I saw them after Connect last year. The stuff they're doing is amazing, and it's exactly what I think the real-time sort of storytelling should be. I think they've got exactly the right idea. They know exactly what they're doing. It's going to be awesome. They've got Pixar guys animating for them. And it's going to be amazing. Everything they do is, I think, going to be pretty spectacular.
So you're basically borrowing from them.
No, I think it was interesting. I was speaking with them at the time, and there was sort of they were having conversations at the time about all these things and making Lost at the time. And I was having the same conversations with them, and I think as well as there were talks yesterday from Third Floor was another company doing the talk. They were saying the same sort of things, and there were other people saying the same sort of things. So I don't know whether there's some sort of cross-pollination of ideas, or if it's literally everyone's coming to the same sort of conclusions because it's exactly where the strengths of the medium doing it that way lie. And there are, you can do it real time. There were other talks, obviously, about doing film, like we're doing right now, and also about pre-rendered. Those are both really good paths as well, because they've all got their own strengths. We're shooting this right now, and if we wanted to, this could be out this afternoon. It's done. Yeah. That's a piece of entertainment, hopefully, and hopefully it's soon. And that can be out, and people can watch it within a day. That's great. You cannot do a day's worth of work and get a piece out for the other ways of doing things. But equally, graphic, if you want to do something a bit more fantastical and stuff, you're really looking at doing it either pre-rendered or real-time. And pre-rendered, you've got more capability in terms of the kind of shininess of everything. You can make everything look amazing, but then you've got your own restrictions. You've got things like the amount of time it takes to render. It can take a long time to render, a very long time to render. There's a company there yesterday called I've got the name.
Neuron.
Doing a thing called Presence, which is spectacular. They've managed to add positional tracking to pre-rendered stuff. I don't know if the people who are watching are aware, but when you're watching this now, You can't move your head around.
You can't do a DK2 kind of thing.
You can't do the DK2 positional tracking. If you move, the perspective doesn't change. They're adding that into pre-rendered. So it's live updating everything, with positional, but it's pre-rendered. You get some really great benefits of that, but it's running at 30 frames per second. You're moving around at 75 or 90 or whatever frame rate. It's at 30 frames per second. And then all the time it takes to render. So there are kind of, probably that. And then with the real time, your downside is it's whatever your hardware can push. That's going to improve in time. Obviously, that will naturally get better. A year to these things will just get better and better and better as far as that goes. Real time film stuff, the cameras will get better. Pre-rendered, obviously computers get faster to render stuff, and the techniques will improve as well. So all these things are just going to get better and better and better. But each way of doing things is going to have a place because they've all got benefits of their own.
Well, I think ultimately there's going to be one that capitalizes, whether it's because it's cheap or it's easy or it's delivers best quality. There's going to be one stream that has the bulk of the...
I think film stuff, because it's so much easier to make, so much quicker to make. There will be more of that. And there will be a really good opportunity for people to do film stuff. I think Immersively, who are doing the cameras
What you're
today.
watching right now.
What you're watching right now is Immersively. I've seen some of their live, their news coverage where they go to events and they set up a camera. They had I think it's Hong Kong protesters, was it? Spectacular stuff where all these crowds around. You're getting a sense of a place and a thing happening in a way that you cannot necessarily do in news media, where you're kind of the editorial is necessarily picking a moment and then editing a story together. When you get to see, essentially be at an event that is happening like that, I think that's a completely different sort of way of telling a news story.
Well, the debate about this has always been short form and long form. The news broadcast that you see on television, the short form version of that story, they get you the bullet points, they show you a little bit of footage, and they're often something else.
Yeah.
This is long form news reporting, but it's actually even more than that. The way that Immersively, as an example, of course, are doing it is it's not just a long form. It's not just telling you it. It's letting you see it for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's brand new.
Absolutely, and I think in kind of conjunction with traditional media, and even things like Twitter, all of these are great news sources, and I think people will, if they know that after watching anything about Hong Kong protests, there's some sort of, and by the way, you can watch this on your headset and see it. I think because you can't get that anywhere else. If that's shot in a way that's informative, the information presented in a way that's informative, I think there's something there that because you can't get it in news, people might well seek that out. There's going to be obviously delivery channels and stuff that has to be worked out. If it's hard to get to, I think people will only view it as maybe a novelty. It has to kind of be as easy as other things to get into, but there's no reason why it can't.
Obviously, that's news though. We talk about movies as well, but Alchemy VR, we're at SWVRC as well. Phil Harper did a presentation, and obviously they're working on documentaries. Do you see that following the same path?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think there's it's a really great format for documentaries because you can again see things like nature documentaries to actually look around and see the nature happen around you. I think there's ways they can do miniaturization, like you could do a computer generated thing inside a nest. Because they do little computer generated segments inside.
They've done a dinosaur one, obviously, with everyone's friend David Attenborough.
That's right. There's lots of really, really interesting directions that I think, everyone who's tried to do VR, most people have tried like the Cirque du Soleil thing, where you're sitting in and it's in stereo and really nicely done and stitched. You look up and there's people, dancing in the air and doing all these things. Everyone that tries it is like, wow, this is great. This is really amazing. That initial kind of, obviously that's the novelty that's giving that reaction. But I think the reaction is real, and I think if you're able to produce something that works to the medium, it could be people will sit there for half an hour, watching that. If it's the right content, I think it could be great. I'm looking forward to seeing it because this is it. We've not really had anything yet. We've had tech demos and we've had really cool, test footage. We've not had like a long form thing released on Gear VR. We've not had a long form 360 video thing. I think it'll be really interesting when that happens.
We've had the kind of bite-sized stuff.
Yes.
And lots of experiments. We haven't had I mean, when Samsung back at CES said, "All right, we're bringing actual TV series things to this now," that's going to be like the first examples of it, where we're actually going to have to start judging it instead of saying, we're just wondering and we're just curious about it right now. Yeah. That's going to be the real test of, is this actually a really interesting way to consume this media?
The thing is, another wider debate here, of course, is that virtual reality, or is that just a new way of viewing existing media?
I think, virtual reality, to me, it feels like it should, if we can have stereo, it should if we can do positional. The thing is, the film content, most of the time that's not going to be possible, and certainly not positional. That doesn't mean it's not a great thing in and of itself, and it doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile thing in and of itself. So the fact whether or not we call it virtual reality is just another way of it's kind of difficult. It's like when I talk about real-time VR storytelling, it's a bit of a clunky title, because really we're talking about films. These are stories, but if you call it a film, people are thinking stuff on the screen. The language just doesn't quite naturally work to describe these things yet. I think calling something VR, we're literally talking about something within an H&D. Well, that's not necessarily, it's not a virtual reality to watch something that's live shot like this. It's not a virtual reality, it's just a different way of viewing filmed content. So the language hasn't caught up to be useful enough yet, but certainly it's as valid as any other form within a
totally agree
VR headset.
Yeah, and that's just one thing that we could spend a long time talking about all the kind of.
It was a big day.
It was a huge day.
Yeah.
I think there were like 10, 15 talks or something.
Yeah. Loads of talks. It was really good.
So it was Dan Page that from Opposable Games that took the lead on this. So we've got to give some respect to Dan Page. That was a very well organised event.
We want to talk to you first about Echo, which is something that you announced back on your Kickstarter page last month.
Yes, that long ago. Wow. It feels like forever.
So just to keep people up to date, this originally started as a Kickstarter campaign for Red of Paws, crazy American
adventure and pie.
So to save you going through all that, no, originally.
No, we want to go through that. That's the good part about it.
Originally, I was doing my demos and stuff like that, my Studio Ghibli demos, and then Oculus Connect came along, and I was like, because I hadn't been to anything in America. There'd only been a few smaller meetups in the UK at the time. There'd been lots of people I've been chatting to within the VR community who were kind of going to SWVR and these kind of bigger meetups in the US, and then finally Connect was announced, and I was like, you know what? Everyone's going to be there. I can't make it to all these meetups in the US, but I could go there, see everyone, and have an experience doing that. So I kind of thought, well, I can't afford it. So I was kind of complaining about that to some of these other devs, and they were like, well, why don't you just ask for the money? Like, people would probably give you the money if you did like a whip round and ask for the cash. People would send it to you, and I was like, I can't just ask for money, because it just felt like a bit, I don't know, a bit cheeky just to say, can I have, just give me money. So I thought, well, look, Kickstarter, that's what that is. It kind of, I thought, well, look, why don't I do a Kickstarter? I thought, all right, I'll do a Kickstarter. But it can't just be a Kickstarter to say, give me money to go to Connect. I thought, I have to do something. Why don't I do a game? All right, I'll do a game. I don't care what it is. I'm going to do a game. So at that point, I launched the Kickstarter. And I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm making, but one of the Kickstarter backer levels was you could put your idea into the game if you back me at whatever price. You can put your idea, and later on it was like put yourself into the game, and there was like one top tier which was have an avatar of you made for the game. One person went for that. But afterwards, because I made it at the time as well, during the Kickstarter, halfway through, I was like, right, I'm going to make a demo. Show people, because I'm saying to people, I'll make a game. I will make a demo to show people the sort of thing it might be. So I did. I spent 2 weeks and I made a game demo thing, which was completely random, a little bit surreal in places. And I was saying, even in the demo, which had little videos of me, and I was saying, look, this is not going to be the game. This is just a few representations of the sort of ideas I'm having right now, what it could be. So I did that and put it out. And some people played it. Even now, there are a couple of people who I say, oh, I'm actually working on a game. They're like, oh, it wasn't that thing. No, that was, I spent 2 weeks on that. I'm going to actually spend longer. But anyway, since then, I started working on it. And one of the VR developers I chatted to, a guy called Jason Story, I'd been chatting to him, and he he does some really amazing coding stuff with Unity, some really great stuff with interfaces, with physics and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really good. But he also did just a simple thing, which was look selecting. So in the demo I have it, you look at something and it selects the object, but it was really glitchy and problematic. And he'd had a whole system set up which solved all these problems of selecting stuff by looking at them. Very clever stuff. And I was like, that would be great just to have in my game. Would you be able to do that? Would you be able to implement that in my game? And at the time, that's all I thought it was. But as we were working together, he was coming up with ideas and I was bouncing ideas off him, and he was kind of listening to my ideas. And we started talking about what the whole game could be and what he could do for it. And eventually it kind of translated into, all right, well, let's do this. And I said, look, do you want to work on the game with me? You can, do coding and stuff like that, and I'll do all the ideas, and I'll be doing most of the fabricating.
So you do the fun stuff, and he does the grunt.
And in the end, we just started working together. It was quite organic that way. And we started going through a whole bunch of different ideas. At one point, it was quite heavily influenced by Pokemon, because Palmer Lucky said, you know what I really want in VR is a Pokemon game. And so
that's what we all want, right?
Yeah, I thought what would be neat is to have these little creatures. Because even then I thought, well, look, this should be based in someone's mind. Because then you can have loads of crazy random ideas. And I thought, well, what if these little creatures represented emotions? So you would essentially capture an emotion, have it as a pet, like hatred or joy or something like that.
Would it be called hatred?
It would be called hatred.
There's some
get him hatred.
Yes.
There's some issues there with a recent game announcement. That's not VR.
Yeah, copyright infringement. No, and and I thought that'd be neat. You would have your emotion creatures, you would level them up, and you would fight other emotions, and you'd be exactly like that. But at the same time, you're in a mind, and there would be a story element, which was you're trapped in like a broken mind, and you have to fix the memories to solve it. But as we did that, we kind of realised there was so much work going into developing this Pokemon fighting thing. We were starting it, and we were like, you know what? Is this fun? Is this something? Are we making that game? Is that what we want? And actually, we stepped away from it. It's like, no, we don't actually want to do that, because the things I was enjoying is the kind of the way storytelling was being integrated into that. The things he was enjoying were doing more physics-based stuff, which was to do with having, like, I guess you would call them Bioshock style powers, where you have the ability to move stuff with your hands using actual motion controllers. He's got Hydra, he's programmed to that. He's looking to use a stem and stuff like that. And we're actually looking to support all pre-OVR and perception neuron, I think it's called. All these motion controllers, we're looking to support them, and Jason's getting them all, and we're going to do all that. But yeah, at that point we were like, all right, let's not do the Pokemon thing. But I did want to keep...
Let's throw away the thing that everybody wants.
But I thought, why not, instead of having the monsters do it for you, you directly have these emotion powers. So you have fear as a power, you have hatred as a power, you have joy as a power. And so, for instance, some monsters, some emotion monsters would be more susceptible to certain powers. Like happiness is gonna, have be more affected by something like fear. Whereas happiness and joy are not really, they're going to strengthen each other maybe. There's a few interesting ways those ideas build themselves. So it kind of went from there. It was like, all right, you have these emotion powers that you're going to use, you have these emotion monsters you're going to tackle, and you've got these memories. You're going to go into specific like dungeons or like walled off levels essentially, which can represent memories. And you're going to essentially use your powers to fix and rebuild the memories. They're going to play out in a way. At the end, you get the kind of an idea of that final memory. It's going to come together, and that memory will essentially play out in some way, and you've solved the level. And at the same time, you're going to defeat emotion monsters and get their powers for yourself. So again, that Bioshock sort of power thing, mixed with some physics puzzles, using your powers to affect the world around you. So a power might have a force effect, another power might have bring it together, another power might have the ability to go through walls or build floors, things like that. So there'll be these puzzles, monsters to tackle, memories to solve. That's basically the structure of the game.
So this is a game where you encourage players to use their hatred.
Yes.
Very Star Wars. I like that.
So there's not going to be like a judgment. There's not.
Okay, right. No, I was going to ask.
So these emotions, there's not going to be a judgment. If you want to use hatred, you can use hatred. If you want to use happiness, you can use happiness. It's not like these are bad emotions to use. Because the idea, there's this early on in the game, you encounter fear, and the idea is that we're going to try and make you sympathise with him to begin with, even though he's a creepy little fella. But you're going to use fear as a power because it's the way you're going to progress. And as a human, we have different emotions. The reason we have emotions is because they're useful. We have fear to stop us doing stupid things like walking off the edge of a building, and we have anger because anger is a useful emotion sometimes when you're being maybe taken advantage of or someone's done something to you. But you've got to control your emotions. There's lots of interesting directions you can take that and do with that.
So we mentioned that this was originally Red of Paws' big, crazy, stupid American Pie adventure.
Yeah.
We didn't mention the name of this game that you're developing now.
This game's called Echo Red. The Echo is the idea that you're in some kind of construct which is kind of scanned your broken mind, and within that construct you're going to rebuild it, and that's called an Echo. And red relates to the status of that. So red is like danger and warning and all that kind of stuff. That's the state your mind is in.
Very clever.
What kind of state are we talking? How's Echo Red looking at the moment?
We're very early stages. We're still building very early stages. There's no deadline. There's no set time we're going to finish this thing. It's essentially going to get done when it's done because there's no budget for this. We're doing it essentially in our free time. There's other things I have got to do VR-wise that do pay the bills, and I kind of have to ensure I pay the rent. So it's one of those things. It will get done, and it will be great. But it's one of those things I can't justify spending too much time on it when there's plenty of other stuff
So
be spending time with.
You mentioned earlier in the Kickstarter there was backer tiers which allow people to have their own ideas. Are you prepared to share how they will end up in Echo Red?
Yeah, so I'm going to be putting in things like portraits. I've got people's portraits. They're going to be essentially memories of people. So you might have a portrait on the wall. I'm going to do some clever things with the way that they're presented. They're not just going to be pictures. I'm going to change them in certain ways and reveal them in certain ways. Quite difficult to describe exactly how that's going to work just yet, because it's still an idea being worked on. The idea is that people are going to place in the game. So someone came up with the idea of, someone wanted Cthulhu, so, and someone said they wanted a Just Plain Badger, I think. And at a certain point I was
I prefer that guy.
How do I stick all these things in? I thought I'm going to start coming unstuck if I'm trying to wedge these into particular memories, or just like it's a surreal thing that just happens to be sitting there doing something. So what I'm actually going to do is have one level, essentially, which is going to be like where all the broken memories and junk stuff is gone. It's all going to be very surreal. So essentially, this is a level that can have anything in it. So that's where the idea is going.
Okay.
Echo Red is just one thing you've got going on right now.
Busy man.
Long before you announced Echo Red, you're also talking about you were giving the first kind of ideas about decay theory.
Yes. So decay theory was probably going to be a game originally that I was going to spend time working on, much in the same way I'm doing Echo Red now. That idea changed though, I think, because I went from wanting to do a just specifically game-led thing to wanting to do something that's more story-related. That was actually mostly from speaking to Story Studio. I spoke to Edward Sarchi from Story Studio. We had a few conversations about this, and actually he sort of convinced me in many ways that sort of narrative direction was the way to take it, and I kind of agreed. Actually, no, this is a really exciting, that sort of storytelling way. It's a far more exciting way to go for that sort of project, and for that's what want to do most of, I guess. So yeah, that changed, and then it got to a point where I was taking it. I wanted to do a really good job on it, and I wanted to make something amazing. My vision of it didn't get too big, but it got to a point where I couldn't just make it myself. And I think I recognised that to make what I wanted to, I certainly needed someone like on concept art or doing actual art work behind it. I mean, I'm an artist, but I'm not a painter. I'm not a drawer. Those sort of concept styles I can do. It's not good enough for what I wanted. So I recognised I needed someone talented to take on that role. And I've been looking for that and trying to get to that stage with it. But in the meantime, I've just been writing it and developing the idea of it. But now I've got to a stage where I'm working on a different project, which is an art-led narrative project. I can't talk about it just yet. We're not in a position to do that. But this is more of an actual bigger production. There's more people involved and things like that. So I think this is a really good direction, because it's going to be, the idea for decay theory is a bit bigger, and I also recognised it was probably too big a scope to tackle at this stage. if this other kind of path I'm working on with these artists and this direction works out well, it seems like a really good natural project to do a little later down the line. So it's something I'm developing, something I really, really love and I want to make, but it's just not quite ready yet to start on.
So we have Echo Red,
Yes.
the project you've just teased, then Decay Theory,
Yeah.
and then you'll be 50.
Yeah. No, I don't. I have 3 VR projects I'm currently working on, which and Crystal Rift. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's the other one I'm working on, and then I've sometimes have other paid work that's more related to animation and marketing and film and stuff. The sort of stuff I was doing before.
You're still doing that.
I stepped into VR, and I'm still doing that sort of stuff, and I don't sleep.
What's the point? Don't get any work done.
I get up early for my daughter, who's like 2, and then I go to bed at midnight practically every night after working. So, and I don't have a social life or anything like that. So don't worry. If you're worried, I'm spending
Just
time.
spend an hour talking.
Yeah.
No,
Very soon.
We're all
I'm
friends
wasting
here. What are you
too
on
much
about?
time. I need to get back and work. No, if you're worried, I'm not spending time on a VR experience. I'm doing it when I'm not sleeping.
This is a VR experience.
This
is research.
So, you've just mentioned Crystal Rift.
Yes.
That's separate from Fire Panda.
Yeah, that's separate from Fire Panda. So Fire Panda is my company, and anything I'm doing with Fire Panda is essentially very story-led. Echo Red, even though it's a game, is very story-led, very story-led. So once I'd done my other previous demos, the Studio Ghibli ones, I'd actually met John Hibbins at a meetup at Bossa Studios, who do Surgeon Simulator. They're awesome. They do some great meetups. And he'd seen my stuff, and he was showing off his game Crystal Rift that he'd been working on for a few months, and he was like, and I tried it, and I was like, this is a really good VR game, because it was, at the time everyone was very concerned with comfort, talking about comfort mode, you know, where the motion, you don't want to make people sick and stuff like that. And it was perfect to avoid all those problems.
Yeah, because what Crystal Rift does is
Yeah.
you move on a square-based grid, so every time you press the forward key,
Yeah.
you'll go forward 1 square.
Exactly.
And then you'll be housed inside a dungeon, and you're going to be solving different kinds of
Exactly. You're in a
challenges.
dungeon, and you're exploring the dungeon
Yeah.
and trying to get out and not die, and that kind of thing. There's monsters and that kind of thing. And you turn 90 degrees at times. You snap, and that's very close to comfort mode for VR.
Yeah.
So at the time, I thought this is great for that. And even since then, having seen some other VR experiences which are using analog sticks to walk around, some of them make me feel very sick. And I kind of feel, no, it's actually worked out as I hoped it might, that this is a comfortable way to do it. But it was also, this was a game that was already, you know, very formed. Like, it had the dungeons you could walk around. The game itself structure was there. I thought, this is something I can come to as a product, as a game development product that is going to go from this stage through to completion. I can work on it, add my ideas to it, and experience that entire production from the starting stuff all the way through to a finished product sold. Because my demos at the time were the first game-related things I'd done that were finished, and I'd never done anything like game development with other people. So the idea that I could then go off on my own and develop something and sell it just seemed unrealistic. I was aware I needed to be working with other people, so to have this project come along, which I already thought was amazing, it was a really good idea and very, very, very nice VR experience. I thought, this is great, I'll do this, and it seems like a nice way to experience that entire thing. Yeah.
So yourself and John are working under the umbrella name of Cytec Games.
Yeah.
And Cytec Games recently revealed to VRFocus that Crystal was coming to Gear VR.
Yes, it is. We have our Gear VRs, and we are currently developing it. It's interesting because I always knew it was a very optimized game. That's another good thing about it. It runs really well, and so I always knew we wanted to do that for VR anyway, because you want to hit, even on DK2, you want to be hitting high frame rates. You want to have a really smooth experience. So it seemed great for that. And then when Gear VR was announced and was coming along, it seemed like, well, this is already running so well, it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be that difficult to go into Gear VR. And since we've been using it, we've only had it 2 or 3 weeks. And it's actually, surprisingly, we've got it running. It works well. There are certain sacrifices you have to make. And there's still certain optimizations we can make. It runs surprisingly well, and we're really happy that it's going to be, the game experience is going to be possible on Gear VR. There's the full game on PC and Mac and Linux and all these other things. Because of the more power, we've got a level editor, which you will be able to play in VR, and you will be able to make your own dungeons, and you will be able to, share those and things like that. The overheads of running that editor just seem too difficult to squeeze into Gear VR, at least at this time. We would love to, we really want to have the level editor on Gear VR so people can make their own levels. It just doesn't quite seem possible.
Is there an opportunity there? Obviously the closed walls of Gear VR may make this an issue, but is there an opportunity there for people to design levels on the PC version and send them to the Gear VR version?
Technically, it should be possible. It's whether or not the systems allow us to do that, how you would get something onto that. If it's possible, we would love to do it. And we're not against it at all. Again, we want to give this tool out to everyone who buys the game so they can make their own levels and share them and stuff. It feels like a really fun, because it's what we used to make the game. So it feels like a really fun thing to share with people and for them to spend time on. So if we can, we will. If people can have that on Gear VR, they will. If there's some way for us to optimise it until they can get it, they will. So we've just got to get there.
So the Gear VR version is heading out when it's done.
When it's done, we hopefully pretty soon. We're working on the game. Like, we've been working on it now for months, like 6 or 7 months. I've been on it. John was working on it for 4 or 5 months before that. So it's had about a year's development time. So it's had a lot. We've implemented all the systems. Everything's there. We're now at a stage of filling out the levels, building in the content.
So how closely related is the Gear VR version to the PC version? Are you playing the same levels?
So essentially it can be the same levels. We've got a clever, John's very, very good at programming systems and stuff. He's got a very clever way of us to switch between the PC and the Gear VR version that essentially you set the build in the code and it basically picks the correct options. So certain things, for instance, in the PC version we have height maps. So all of the walls and stuff, all the bricks feel 3D and everything like that. We've got a torch type lighting effect, there's other lighting stuff going on. You can't do that on Gear VR, you can't have those height maps, it just doesn't work. Performance just won't allow for it. So those are switched off. Certain lighting things are switched off and stuff like that. But the actual game, other than some of these graphical things, is exactly the same. So it comes down to whether once you've added in some of them, like if you were to have 100 fireballs going on and off at once, that might be difficult for Gear VR. So it's whether or not the levels we've currently built or are building are going to work directly translate to Gear VR, or if we have to look at other ways to optimize that, or if we have to look at potentially the Gear VR version. Our hope, what we would prefer, is for the Gear VR version and for the PC version essentially to be the same thing. Other than a level editor, which is something we can't currently get working on the Gear VR, for it to be the same game, just those graphical differences that you would expect anyway.
So what kind of proximity can we expect the releases?
Well, we don't have a release date yet. We're working really hard to get the Gear VR version essentially ready. It sounds odd to get it ready first. The reason for that is as simple as there is the Gear VR store. We expect it to be available before a store for the DK2. But currently it's still, it's one of those things when we're in the midst of making all the content and we're just kind of trying to build the game as quickly as we can to be the game we want. It's one of those things where plans may change and we may decide something gets released earlier, something gets released later. But essentially the idea is just to ensure that each version is kind of catered to the platform it's going out on and to go out at the right times. So some of it we don't quite know yet. We're going to see. The plan is always though to have essentially all the versions go out and essentially be the same game. If we can do it, we will do it. If it's possible to do it, we will do it.
Okay. Right. Okay. I think that's where we're going to leave that one.
Cool.
But thank you very much for coming in, Nick. We really appreciate it. If people want to,
fun being here. I like the cameras. And yeah, it's cool. I'm gonna move.
Like the cameras.
I'm gonna probably break the stitching. I'm really sorry.
Don't break the stitching, Nick.
Oh, he's done it.
Oh no, but Okay.
This is the highlight of the VRCast right here.
This is why people wait an hour and 12 minutes.
If you're still here,
Nick's going to perform.
This is a GoPro rig. Are we allowed to say what it is? It's a GoPro rig.
Yeah,
Apparently.
It's a really. There's 6 cameras. I looked at some other video content. It's really nice.
It is very nice. Is there 6? 1, 2, 3,
I think
4,
you'll be
5.
able to
There is
decide
6.
for yourself whether you think this sort of filmed content.
We touched on it earlier,
Yeah.
and earlier in the
I'm
VRCast.
quite-
They're going to know if you're lying.
I'm impressed with this particular rig and its capabilities and everything like that. I think the guys who have built it and
Massively.
immersively, I think they're doing a pretty good job, and everyone should check out their stuff definitely.
Like this VRCast.
Like this
Very
video.
Yes, thank you, Immersively. We'd
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
thank you for helping us out on this one, because this is something we wanted to do for a while, and I think as a first episode goes, that's...
It's come together.
Nick, if people want to follow you on the Twitters and the Facebooks...
Yes, my company name is Panda. They can go to the website if they want, firepanda.co.uk. They can follow me on Twitter at redofpaw, all one word. I won't explain why it is that, but that's what it is.
We'll save that for another episode.
Yeah, and they can go to nickpittom.com, which will take them to Fire Panda. And I have a blog which they can find through the Fire Panda VR page as well. But yeah, the blog is what I update most. Twitter, obviously, Twitters, and yeah, actually Twitter's probably the easiest one. Tweet me if you want to chat about anything either. I've got plenty of time. Anyone, mate.
You can find Crystal Rift on...
Crystalrift.com, yes.
Yes, okay.
.com or .co.uk, probably .com.
Okay, cool.
Either
And then,
way.
You should know.
Crystal Rift.
if people want to read more about Echo Red, are you continuing to update the Kickstarter blog about it? Or?
Yeah, I do. So you can check out that Kickstarter, but my blog,
Okay.
which again you can get through Fire Panda, the VR thing, or just follow my Twitter. I update everything on my Twitter anyway.
Okay.
Or search for it on VRFocus, because we cover the hell out of it.
VRFocus do it. The Reddit subreddit /Oculus has always got some really good content as well. I'm there regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Speaking of VRFocus, if you'd like to
Yes.
follow us, you can follow us at Twitter, which is just at VRFocus, no space between any VR or focusing, just one word. You can also go find us on Facebook, where we'll share all our posts, and we post like crazy, so you'll find lots of stuff on there. And then youtube.com/VRFocus for a pretty extensive list of interviews, trailers, gameplay videos, and maybe at some point in the future,
360-degree VRcasts.
So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you in the near future.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Yay.